Hello and welcome to the Being Well podcast series. In these episodes, our guests discuss their experiences with mental health. These are personal experiences and thoughts that have been shared. This is not official guidance on how to seek mental health support. This is just what worked for us.
Cool. And we are a go. Alrighty. Welcome back. Episode 4. Today I'm here with Molly, who is another trustee here at Being Well. How are you doing?
Good. Excited to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. So the first thing I think I normally do with these sort of conversations that we have is just let you lead the first few minutes. Just give us like a little background on your experience with mental health, like whether any particular time periods that stick out for you as a sort of like a starting point, if you want to call it that, or things that have happened where you became more cognitively aware of your own mental well-being and where you were mentally.
Yeah, of course. I guess so. For me, my sort of problems probably started around the time I was doing my A levels. So I was still kind of at school, living at home with family, but I've had like lots of different difficulties throughout my kind of late teenage and early adult years. So I'm 25 now, and not sort of having so much of those difficulties, but it took like quite a few years to get the right support and make some change. So I guess I'm just keen to talk about that, and it's part of the reason why I started this charity along with the others to really think about getting support earlier and how that might make a difference.
Yeah, it's interesting. The most consistent thing that I've come across with these episodes, the last 3 is movement into higher education seems to be this point where things start to take a little bit of a turn. Myself included, I have a very similar experience. I think it's one of those things, isn't it? When you get to that age, things start to feel a bit more serious. And there's pressures coming, academically and socially, like you're just getting older into your late adolescence. Like it's a stressful time. And I think so many people neglect the mental health because there's just, growing up, that sort of education level just isn't really there for you to really keep yourself in check. At least, for us, it's better now than it was when we were back in A level going into uni kind of thing. But it was just noticeably a lot. There was just more, like a bit overwhelming, those pressures that come with it. I think it is so common that when it starts, when you just get that little bit older and you do start to have to make decisions about your future, it's quite a lot to handle, particularly at a young age. Like it's one of those things. It's really, really scary to like think about, when you're 16 thinking about uni, because uni kind of sets you up for the next part. And it's like, oh, this is all happening really fast. And I think a lot of people can start to, let things slip because you're wanting to do well academically and you've got the pressure of that. There's just the general anxiety of like exams, making sure coursework's all sorted. Like there's just so much going on in that period. Like, so, what was it in that later stage, like education wise, that came along? Was it pressures, that you put on yourself? Or was it like external from, from the environment you're in kind of thing? Like, where do you reckon it comes from?
I think, for me, I was lucky enough to go to a school that really did kind of try and set you up well for whatever happens after school. And it was quite an academic environment. And so I think that came with a lot of pressure to go to university. I remember my year was like the first year where a few people didn't go to university, and they've gone on to have some really cool and amazing careers that just don't require university, but there was definitely an expectation that everyone would go. And so that was quite a lot of pressure. And also just, I think it was my kind of personality to be a bit of a perfectionist, hold myself to high standards, and, wanted to please my parents and my family. Like my dad was the first in his family to go to university, and his family hold that in really high regard. So I think those kind of pressures were there, and I know a lot of other people feel those pressures at school. But like being a teenager is hard enough. You're going through the motions, it's a lot, and then you have all these kind of pressures, maybe to do well at school, but also, especially now with social media, like everyone's comparing each other, and I was kind of just coming into that social media was blowing up as I was at that age. So I think all those comparisons didn't really do me good. And, I'd been not particularly happy with like how I looked when I was younger. I was, quite overweight and that kind of thing. So just a lot of like things going on that were gonna, I think, affecting my confidence. And then, it kind of worsened when I got to uni, because there was a lot of other I don't want to go off course too much, but other sort of things going on in my life, in a relationship, that did even more to knock my confidence. So I think it was just that over a couple of years, where there's lots of big life changes anyway, having a few things going on that just wore me down really. And then I just wasn't coping very well by the time I was in sort of second year of uni.
Yeah, and uni in particular, it takes those stresses and the pressures of A level, and then it amplifies it, and then some.
Yeah.
It's like that same time period over a longer course of time, and it's just so much more intense. And then on top of that, you've got, the pressures to make new friends. You're completely thrown in the deep end again, starting from scratch. It's like your first day of school. You don't know any. It's an intense place to be, and you have so much work to do on top of it. There's just a lot that compounds on top of each other, particularly if you're already not massively confident and comfortable in where you are. Going into that, it's just gonna, exacerbate pre-existing issues that you've got going on. And it's a test of will going into uni, because it's like the main, I think the first big step people take after they leave school is either going to uni or not going to uni. That can be just as big for some people. Like if you come from a super academic background and you don't feel like uni's for you, that could in itself create quite a lot of personal problems, because there's an expectation from where you come from of uni is the next step. There, what else are you going to do? And if you don't feel like it's for you, I mean, that can start to weigh on people as well. It's
Definitely.
it's a real tumultuous time period, like figuring out what you want to do and where you want to go. Like if your foundation isn't quite as solid, that just becomes even more of a daunting task.
Yeah, definitely.
It is just a real test.
Yeah.
It's a real time to be alive. So when you noticed things start to drop and you were more aware something's not quite right, what was your first reaction? Where was your first port of call? What was it that you sort of reached for when you realized that something's not quite right here and I don't know if I can do it on my own?
I think what was hard is knowing, is this just normal life stuff? Am I just finding this a bit hard? It's normal to be upset after a breakup, or be a bit anxious about exams. And I think it took me a long time to notice this isn't your typical experience, and it's having so much of an impact. And I think my instinct was to just not kind of tell anyone and just go into myself and just sort of pretend it wasn't happening. And I don't think that's a particularly helpful way to deal with it. But also I'm trying, I had to look back on it and be kind to myself and think I kind of get that I was scared to talk about it.
But internalizing things is quite normal. Like when you're not sure what's happening, I think so. I think it's quite common to sort of try and do it on your own first. It becomes something implicitly kind of just you shut in to try and work it out, and then it just gets to a point where you get to the breaking point. It's like, you know what, this isn't normal. I can't keep this in because it's eating me up. Something's got to give. So after you've internalized it and you've realized this isn't really working, did you look at local resources? Were did you fall down the rabbit hole of self-diagnosing off WebMD, as so many people do, which often makes it so much worse because you get some horror story diagnosis that is most of the time massively inaccurate anyway? What do you think was your where did your brain go first? It was like, right, I'm gonna I think this is going to be something that helps?
So for me, I think my difficulties kind of started throughout sort of sixth form and got worse going into uni, but I didn't really do anything about it in sixth form. I kind of just kept it to myself and tried to cope through it. I think looking back, I was depressed, but just tried to kind of get through day to day. Whereas when I went to uni, it was more kind of anxiety that I really struggled with. But I didn't really do anything about it until it started impacting my sleep. So I would kind of lay in bed for hours worrying about stuff, and then end up being knackered and not being able to do my like coursework and stuff. So that's when I then went to the student counselling service and asked them for a bit of help. And they were really good. They saw me really quickly. And I got access, I think, to 6 sessions of counselling, which was really helpful. They kind of sort of gave you a space to talk about what was hard and helped with kind of practical skills for things like worry, and kind of coached me through the day to day. So that was a good starting point. I think, I'd really recommend anyone going to sort of a student counselling service as a starting point if you're at uni and you're struggling, because they can just help direct you to that.
Yeah, no, completely agree. I used the one at my university, I think, throughout all my 3 years, and those resources are really, really good. I mean, they're there for a reason. A lot of the time, at least in my experience, they were quite inundated, so there was a little wait, but I mean, you're really looking at a week to 10 days turnaround, I think it was.
Yeah.
And they are there to help and point you in the right direction. I mean, if they feel like it's necessary, they can suggest you go to a GP to explore it further, or if you can get to a better place with the 6 sessions. That's a really, really great starting point. It's a free service and it's local on site. I mean, yeah, I completely agree. I'd highly recommend for anyone just to at least start it and start having conversations. If there's a resource available, make full use of it. It's there to be used.
Yeah, definitely.
So
Agreed.
after your so you've gone to the student services, did you then follow up with going to a GP to discuss like further treatments, like on medication or any like behavioral therapies or anything at all like that?
Yeah, so I mean, it's quite hard to remember back, but I think there was a bit of a gap where I kind of felt a bit more confident. I was like, I'm coping a bit better. But then around the time of, I think it was my second year exams, I kind of, my overall confidence was still quite low, and I was still kind of generally quite anxious, but I was getting through it day to day. But then when my second year exams came up, it just sort of tipped me over the edge again. I think I really found the course that I was studying psychology, and I found the course really hard, and there was a lot, a big workload, and I started having panic attacks. And they're really acute, like it's really horrible experience where you feel really, really anxious, and kind of, for me, it's just like I become really overwhelmed and feel like I can't breathe properly and can't stop crying and like hyperventilating. So it feels really scary. I'm looking back, you are safe in that moment, but you don't realize it when it's happening. And then I just became even more anxious about having another one. So that's when I first went to a GP, because I was like, this can't keep happening. It's not good. So I went to the GP I was registered at my university, and they prescribed me some medication called diazepam, which is typically given as a short-term medication to help people who are having panic attacks. So that was my first experience with medication, but I've also taken other medications throughout the years. So later on, a couple of years ago, that kind of bout of depression came back. So I tried an antidepressant to help me through that. But then there's also been times I've accessed therapy throughout the years, but they've been a little bit more recently. So not really whilst I was at university.
So when you've used been prescribed antidepressants at all, did you find that you ever needed to change the particular one you were taking or dosage or anything? Because straight off the bat, they don't always necessarily perform as expected. Just, the dosage might need upping or lowering, or, a different drug entirely might be tried and tested instead. So did you find that you needed to change, your at least medical treatments at all, or, were you able to let one run its course and, see the benefits from it? Because I think it's something that is really important, particularly also with, therapists as well. If something doesn't feel like it's working, it's always worth telling whomever it may be that's in control of that. So with a therapist, if you don't feel like you're really clicking with them, you don't have to feel bad about saying it. The same way that if, medication doesn't feel like it's really working, that's something to bring up with the GP, just because then you can explore either other treatments. I mean, they might take you off medication entirely, or they can, try something else. I mean, did you find that you were able to stay on one, or did you sort of go through a few to find one that worked best for you?
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's not one size fits all, like you're saying. You really have to find what works for you, and that can involve a bit of trial and error. I think I was quite lucky that when I tried an antidepressant, it really helped me in terms of, what I really struggled with was just feeling really hopeless and kind of not being interested in anything and just feeling really down all the time. And I noticed a really quick change when I started antidepressants, where that started going away. For some people, it can take, I think they say sort of 4 to 6 weeks to really feel the full effects, but I was noticing it within a week. So I was really lucky, but it wasn't without side effects. I think, there were a few side effects I had, which made it, not an entirely positive experience, but it had a good effect on my mental health. So I stuck with it. So I've only tried one antidepressant, but, in terms of therapy, I can talk a little bit more about different therapists I've worked with and approaches I've tried.
Yeah, I mean, that would be great. I mean, did you take medication alongside therapy ever at all, or was it a separate event?
It was kind of separate, actually. I guess for me, it was kind of flipping between times when anxiety was really bad and times when my mood or depression was really bad. And for me, I mostly found that medication was helpful for when I was depressed. Because for me, I think it was quite seasonal. So it would often be in the winter I'd find things really hard. But then I'd find the medication really helpful, and then I'd feel better quite quickly, and I'd only need to be on it for 4 or 5 months, and then I'd feel really good. Whereas with anxiety, it felt more like it was coping with like triggers, and it felt like anxiety medication was helpful. Sometimes I had tried that, and it helped me feel less anxious in my body. Like I didn't feel so tight in my chest or like so panicky, for example. So there was a few times where I was like taking anti-anxiety meds whilst I was having therapy, but actually the therapy was what really, really helped me with anxiety and like confidence. So I think it just depends on what you're going through at what time. But I would always like recommend just being open to trying whatever, and being guided by your GP or your mental health professionals you're working with.
Yeah, for
Because
sure.
a lot of the time a combination can really help. If you're really stuck in a rut, taking some medication to help you feel even like 10% better might be that boost you need to be able to then get to therapy every week and engage with a therapist. And that's a big task in itself, and it's quite a brave thing to do, I think. So
Yeah,
medication can help
yeah, for
get
sure.
you to that point.
So you mentioned that you've had other, types of therapies. So
Yeah.
I mean, these sorts of things are all subjective, but just on a personal level, what kind of therapy do you think worked the best for you, for what you needed it for? What stands out for you as, this was, something I'm so glad that I did, because it really, really helped me, get to where I want to be, within your mental state? Like, was it one-on-one? Did you have group sessions at all, like CBT, that kind of thing?
Yeah. So I was seen by IAPT, which is the name for community mental health services that a lot of people will be seen under. So people with kind of mild to sort of middle level difficulties. And I, at one point, had individual CBT. So CBT meaning cognitive behavioral therapy, which is like one of the main approaches that mental health professionals use, because it's got lots of evidence to say that it helps people. And yeah, so I had sort of short-term individual CBT at one point, and then I later on had group CBT. I think for me, the individual CBT was just not right for me at that time. And I don't think it was because it was individual or because of the therapist or anything like that. I think looking back on it, I wasn't ready to do the work and like make the changes. I was still in that, this feels really hard. I know it needs to change, but I just don't even know where to start kind of headspace.
Right.
And I just, yeah, it wasn't the right time. It was over the phone, and I'd sort of forget that I had the appointment, or they'd give us tasks to practice or like skills to practice, and I wouldn't practice them in between. And I think in my, looking back, I just wasn't ready to put that effort in and to like accept that I needed help properly, even though I'd got to the point of kind of half getting the help. I wasn't in the right headspace for it. But I work in mental health at the moment, and I really do believe that individual therapy is great and can work for so many people. It just wasn't right for me at that time.
No. It's interesting, isn't it, how you can there comes a point where you're able to say, I'm not ready for this. And even when it's something constructive that's gonna help you in the long run, you have to be mentally ready to actually engage. Otherwise it just becomes another source of something that's a little bit overwhelming. And if you're not at that point where you're fully accepting that you do need the help, it just becomes like almost like an arduous task, it's almost like it's just something else to think about, which I think is quite interesting that you're at a point where you're like, I'm just not ready for this, and it wasn't really working for you. But yeah, just you mentioned studying psychology in your academic life, and you've carried that through to your your professional post-uni life as well. I mean, how much of your own experience cemented that career path for you? Because I can imagine it would have definitely had an impact for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I just started studying psychology because I thought people are interesting, behavior is interesting, like it just sounds really like it would be fun to learn about. And then kind of discovering that clinical psychology is a career, which is what I do, which is basically just working with people of any age with any kind of mental health problem in the NHS. I just sort of, the more difficulties that I faced, the more I realized, oh, there's a career out there that can help people not feel this way and help people feel better. I was like, I want to do that because I don't want anyone else to sort of feel the way I did. So yeah, it really did help cement that, and I can't imagine doing anything else for a job now. It's more than just a job, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot more than that.
With that, as you learn more, through your studies and then through working as well, is there an element where you feel like you're in a better position to help yourself now as well, because it's something that you've studied and you understand it on like a different level now? Do you find that you gain, like just on like a personal selfish level, like do you find that you have gained a little bit more of a like an edge in coping with your own mental health issues that are that affect you on like a day-to-day? Like, do you feel like you're in a better position now to understand and cope and deal with them, having had that exposure to it on an academic and professional level?
Absolutely. I think I've learned about the skills that can help you cope, and I understand a bit more about how emotions show up in our body, and about thoughts and feelings, and I've got the information, and I'm really glad to have that, and it's definitely put me in a better position. But also I always joke that psychologists, we don't really practice what we preach enough. I might know that it might be really helpful to try mindfulness, for example, but I don't do it every day, even though all the evidence that I learn about at uni and in my job tells me that that can be really good for mental health. And it just comes back to that, being able to connect up what you know is good with like finding the motivation to do it and to improve. And I think it just shows how hard therapy can be and changing can be, but it also, I feel really confident that it's worth it, and I've definitely learned a lot. And yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, it's funny when you say you joke about that, but I think there genuinely is like a bit of a disconnect. Like, with particularly like with mental health professionals, I feel like, I'm guilty of this as well. You think because they're in the environment and the field that they are, that they've got, everything together, but that's just not the case. No
Yeah.
one's immune to this kind of thing. And therapists have their own struggles, and people that work in psychology also have their own struggles. I mean, understanding it makes you more aware of what you have yourself. And I do think people don't necessarily give enough credit to people in the mental health profession, because you don't know what goes on behind closed doors, and the people that are helping also need help at the same time. And that's something that I think we could do well for being more aware of.
Yeah, and like you've hit the nail on the head, that like mental health professionals aren't immune to this stuff. Like we might have all the skills there and the tools, but we can't stop bad things happening to us in life. We can't control that. And I guess it's about being able to cope with those bad times a bit better. But you have to put the effort in to practice that. But yeah, I wouldn't want people to think that, yes, psychologists are immune to this kind of thing.
No.
Like most people I know who work in mental health have been through their own struggles, and that's prompted them to want to help other people.
And I think that is something that, I think is so, I don't want to say noble, because I don't want it to come across as condescending, but do you know what I mean? Like when you've got people that are going through things themselves, and then they use that as a platform to then help other people who are in similar or, differing positions. I think, it's such a valuable asset, I think, to everyone. If you're able to take what you've gone through and use it in a constructive way to drive you forward to go into this field to help other people, I mean, it is it's a real show of resilience to be able to carry that forward and use it to sort of help like someone else. Because normally people will tend to focus, you've got to look after yourself first, but being able to do both and help other people where you have felt like you've been in a similar situation, I think it's just such a, I don't know how to say it, it's just something that needs so much recognition.
Oh, that's really kind to say.
It really does, because a lot of people might not have the sort of motivation to cope with their own struggles and then be there for someone else at the same time, because I can imagine that could get quite a lot at times. Do you find that it gets a bit overwhelming at all? Like, do you carry much of what you deal with at work afterwards, or is it when when the day's over, it's you get to it tomorrow kind of thing?
To be honest, I think it's never going to be a job where you can leave it at the office, because you're working with people and their struggles are real. And I definitely think about people I work with. They pop up into my head sometimes, and I just think that shows that you care about your job and what you're doing. And yeah, to be honest, the biggest thing is it's just a real privilege to like work with people and for them to open up and share their stories with them, have the opportunity to help them. Like sometimes that is hard because people have been through a lot and it can be quite difficult to hear, but to be honest, I just find it more frustrating. I get more worked up about things at work, like there's not enough staff to see people quicker, or things like that, rather than feeling really sad about what I'm hearing. And it's not that I'm not empathetic, but I really am. But I try and, my job's not to be sad with that person, it's to help them feel less sad. It's kind of the way I think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously we know that there is no one size fits all, and that everyone has such an individual experience when it comes to their own mental health. Have you noticed any consistencies at all with the people that you've worked with in your career so far? Like, are there any parallels that you can draw between the people that you speak to? Like, is there any like consistent theme? I know, as I said, it's such an individual experience, but the world's so interconnected now. Do you come across any sort of consistent factor that is quite common among young people or older people?
Yeah.
Like, what sticks out the most?
I think, like I said at the start, I think I mentioned one thing is definitely that sort of comparing to others, which I think has been brought about a lot more by social media. That's definitely one thing I've noticed is quite common, particularly with younger people, which then leads to maybe more concerns about body image, or like not feeling as confident or not feeling as good as other people. I think that is often a consistency, but not everyone. But I also think a big thing that I've noticed is, like me, just a kind of real lack of understanding of what's going on, and whether this is normal or whether I could do with some support. And I think people have talked in our other podcasts about this kind of, not realizing what a panic attack was, that when they were experiencing it, or not knowing, this is anxiety, or this is, not just having a bad day, but it's, consistent low mood where maybe I could get some support. I think that's something I've really noticed. So, like, people take a long time to seek help, and they've relied on them, coping day to day and just muddling through for a long time.
Do you think that, you say it takes a long time for people to, realize that they do need help? Do you think, and now this is purely just a speculative question, do you think there's a part of that where people know earlier on that something's not right, but it's almost too scary to properly address because then it makes it real? Do you kind of understand what I'm saying? Like, being sort of cognitively dissonant on what's going on, because to admit that you're not okay is admitting that there's a problem, and that in itself is uncomfortable to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's probably a big part of it. And also just telling someone else you're not okay is quite a big thing.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people might take it as like an admission of, so I think particularly in men, admitting that you're not all right. There's that, that kind of feeling of like, oh, there's a weakness there, when in reality it's actually the opposite. I think being able to go to another person and say that you're not all right, I think is probably one of the stronger things that you can do. Like, admitting that you can't do something on your own takes way more than just ignoring it and hoping it will go away. It's not indicative of weakness at all. It's a sign of strength, because you want to be better and you can't do it on your own. It's the one that's the most consistent when we have these conversations, is there is no shame in needing someone else to get you to where you need to be. Having those support networks is so crucial to recovery and to getting to where you want to be. Reaching out it takes a lot. It really does.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think I would have suffered a lot less if I had done that more, like sort of talking about it. I think I didn't ask for help for a long time, or tried to cope with it on my own. And I think that all that did was mean it took longer to get the right support, and meant my like family and friends didn't have an opportunity to help.
Did you
I think
rely
that's a
on
big part.
did you rely on people close to you as you sort of were going through the process? Did you then start to lean on, the people around you more, or was it something that you still, because I think for me, I have I quite like, I'm obviously always ready to talk to, my support network when I'm not feeling my best, but there's something I quite like about, speaking to a third party that's not emotionally involved, because it's easier for me because I know that they're not going to take any of that on. But it's having that support network there for when you need them that is something that's invaluable. So did you find that as you were going forward that you were able to sort of externalize it to people around you?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely kind of more in the latter half of university, and kind of since I've left university, my current boyfriend was a massive support. He got it, and he kind of he understood that I wasn't the best person I could be at that time, because I would, for example, when I was feeling really low and anxious, I would get really irritable and kind of not be the nicest person, or not be as sensitive or able to like think about him as well. But he got it, and he worked with it, and he would just try and do his best to support me. And so that was a huge thing. I'm completely indebted to him for doing that. So even just having one person you can speak to, or that can be huge. But actually, the bigger the support network is, the more support you have, obviously, and the stronger sort of foundation you have, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And ultimately, everyone that you speak to, the people that you want to include in your support network, they want what's best for you as well. So, you mentioned that when you are at your, when you're not feeling your best, and there's the irritability, there's, that snapping, maybe not being as attentive to someone else. I mean, it's they're not going to take that personally, because they will understand. And like all that kind of thing comes from a place of care. Like they want you to get to where you want to be as well. It's almost like it's like a team effort that you drive. So you're in the I remember using the analogy with Ollie in the first podcast, is you're in the driver's seat and then they're giving directions when you need them. And I think that's like the most important thing, is just because you reach out to someone else doesn't mean you lose that control and the personal accountability of your own journey. You just have them along for the ride to point you to the road when you get lost. And I think that's the biggest thing that I'll always say.
And I think therapy is not that dissimilar.
No, not at all.
I always think of it.
Yeah, sorry, carry on.
No, that's okay. I was just going to say, like, I think a lot of people feel like therapy gets done to them, but that's not the case. It's about collaboration and working together. And you can kind of think of it similarly, like, the person seeking therapy is always in control. They're always the driver. And the therapist is, helping them, they're directing them, they're guiding them, they're helping them discover what needs to change. But they're not going to be, taking over as driver.
No, it's the sat nav that's there for reference for when you need it. It's less of a you letting them, choose which direction to take. They're helping you work it out yourself. Yeah. And it's still big. You retain so much of that autonomy in therapy. And I think it probably is quite off-putting for some people. Like they think, well, I don't want someone else to just start, telling me how to feel and kind of thing. And it's just not like that at all. They listen, suggest, and sort of help you reframe the way that you think. And I think that's ultimately what, that's the best thing that you get out of it. Because you're not giving control over to someone else. You're working with someone else to maintain your own course.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess I would love people to be able to understand that and have that expectation, and I hope it makes therapy seem a little bit less scary.
Yeah, because it's an intimidating concept of like going to therapy, because I think it's
Oh
just
yeah.
with the historic stigma of going to a therapist means that you've got a problem and there's something wrong with you, and it's while on the surface level that may well be the case, but it's it's no different to going to the doctor when you've just discovered that you've got a rash and you don't know where it's come from. It's exactly the same process as going to a GP. You're going to someone who's an expert in a field to help you understand what's going on.
Yeah.
But because it's mental related, there's always been that stigma around it. I mean, there's a stigma around mental health, generally speaking, as we all well know. That slowly the walls of that are being broken down, but
Yeah.
therapy is a daunting concept, particularly the first time you go. And like group therapy particularly, I can imagine would have been quite a scary thing. You're going into a room full of strangers to confess your deepest darkest, but it's not like that. It's that collaboration, it's sharing rather than just opening up and telling people everything about you.
Yeah, and knowing you're not the only one going through it is just so powerful.
Because these things are really isolating and you can really feel like you are on your own. And, having that support network, as we've discussed, is huge for knowing that you're not. But also, it's the people that are experiencing similar things.
Yeah.
That is quite a big source of, reassurance, because you're not the only person that's experiencing the things you're going through. Other people have experienced them too, and they've made it out the other side. So it's that's the comfort that comes with it, in an unusual way, that it is quite comforting to know that you're not the only one, because that makes it seem less individual, because
definitely.
we're all here to make sure each other, you're here for other people, and that's why you go into psychology as the field, because you've had your experiences and you want to help, and you had that base interest in people and their behaviors, and then that compounded with your own experiences, and you want to do that for someone else. That's the whole point.
Yeah, and that's what the charity that we're running is all about as well, like just finding ways to help so that other people don't have to go through what we went through, and sharing our learning, and just making sure people know they're not alone.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that is the key. It's you don't have to deal with it on your own at all.
Yeah.
Ever. Like, you're never really alone. Someone always cares.
Yeah.
And it's just a
Definitely.
case of reaching out. That's the first step. It's a scary one. I'm not saying it's easy to make that first call, but once you do, it becomes so much easier to do it again. Once you cross that threshold, it's like
agree.
that nothing bad's going to happen from it. You've made the call, and now someone knows, and there's that extra level of accountability, because they're going to help you get to where you want to be as well.
Yeah, it really does make it easier, and it's scary, but it does make a difference.
It really does. It really, really does. So just coming to the end here, and it kind of segues quite nicely into the final questions that I like to ask the guests on the podcast. What would you say is your biggest piece of advice, both coming as from as a personal level, and also being a mental health professional yourself, when it comes to someone who is unsure how to start their process of getting to a better mental health level? They don't really know where to turn to as a first port of call. What would be your initial gut reaction? Like, what do you say to someone who's like, I'm not sure I can do this, I don't know what to do?
I think my main thing, which we kind of already covered, but is just so important, is just tell someone. I think for me, I kept everything in for so long, and because I hadn't told anyone, I then got into my head that I've got to tell everyone now. I'm not being honest. I've got to tell everyone. But actually, not everyone needed to know what was going on, and they just needed to have one trusted friend or person who I could rely on to help me.
Yeah.
And I also just think, don't expect, manage your expectations for how that goes. Just break it down. It can seem like this big thing to tell someone you're not okay and you're struggling, but just think about planning one conversation. It's not all going to go away from one conversation, but it's that massive important step. And just plan out what you want to say, kind of remind you're not asking them to fix it, you're just asking them to be that passenger in the car with you to help you along the way. They might be able to help you make that phone call to the GP, or look at a website with you to find some resources. And I just think that's the massive step, because then someone else is in it with you. They're not going through the same thing, but they care about you and they want to help it go away. And I think the longer I didn't tell people, the more it got harder.
Yeah, absolutely. And then on the flip side of that, if there was somebody wanting advice on how to help someone else, so if they're unsure on how to be there for someone else, or how to help them get onto the right path and go in the right direction, because that is also quite a it's quite a big task, because being the support network it's a lot of work as well.
Absolutely,
you've really got to be patient with it. And so what would you again, from both sides of it, how do you help someone who's trying to help someone else?
And I've been in that position as well. It's another podcast but to talk about kind of looking after someone. But my main thing would be just be there for them. Don't try and fix it. Like, you're not there to fix it. Just in the same way as if your friend came to you with a physical health problem, you wouldn't be expected to suddenly become a physio or a surgeon, but you can support them with getting to the place they need to get help. But also just listen and show them that you care. I think a lot of people feel worried that they're not going to know what to say, or they're not going to be able to make any change, but there is so much power in just being a person with someone and just listening and hearing them out. And it really is that simple. I think that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes people don't even need you to say anything back.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't have to give like some guru response. It can just very much be a case of, okay, like, I get it, we'll get there. You don't have to have all the answers, because no one's expecting you to. No one expects you to fix it for them. It's just they want someone to listen. And I think that's such a key thing that you've hit there, is just listening on such a human level, and showing that you care it counts for so much more than it might initially seem.
Definitely.
Like, the impact that can have, it can sometimes be immeasurable, for someone's confidence in going through this process of knowing that someone will be there to listen, and knowing that someone cares and wants you to get to the same place that you want yourself to be. I think it just reaffirms that you're not on your own, because it can feel such a lonely experience, but it really doesn't have to be. And I think those two massive takeaways is reach out. And if you're the one that someone reaches out to, is just be there, be present, listen, just be there to help them help themselves.
Absolutely.
All right. Well,
that seems like a good place then.
I was going to say that brings it to a very natural end. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Molly. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been good to talk through everything.
Yeah, no, some really important things hit there. Really insightful. Okie doke. Well, thank you for listening, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Thanks. Bye.